Hello and welcome to this iMesh video. So I have created this scene and I have seen some people asking how it was done. So I thought this is a perfect opportunity for me to teach you guys how to make it. It's not going to be a full tutorial, but I think it's going to be pretty helpful. I'm going to go over all the tips and tricks which I used to create this scene. But I think the key concepts that we're going to go over in this video are going to be optimizations. This scene needed lots of optimizations because, as you can imagine, these bouquets are very heavy and I only have an 8GB GPU. And as well as going over the lighting, some displacement information and general render settings. So I think all you guys will find this pretty useful. So hopefully you can create something like this yourself. All right, then let me jump into this tutorial then. So I might as well just start by saying that if you are interested in architecture visualization, you are even semi-interested in what I'm about to talk about, I'd recommend you check out iMesh. You can access now all of our 2,500 assets for only $17. So yes, it does come with cars. It comes with everything that you will need to create basically a business for yourself. And now we can access the entire thing for $17. That is a monthly fee, but you will get access to everything from day one. So you pay $17, you can download everything if you wanted to. There is a benefit of staying subscribed because some things like geometry nodes, these are like basically a computer program on their own. So they usually have some sort of bugs, and we are actually updating all of these. So if you are already subscribed to iMesh and we update something, you get the most up-to-date version. And these are going to be all much faster and work a lot better. So that's the benefit of being subscribed. And also you get access to 30 new assets per month. So every single month we try to release better and better and better assets. So if you are starting to take this more professionally, you want to start making money from this. The benefit of an actual expanding library is that you don't need to keep showing your customers the exact same renders over and over again. But yeah, we basically have everything you will need to create some renders. So then, that's iMesh, ridiculous price. I don't know if anyone's doing it to our pricing at this moment, but basically everything is $17. So I'd recommend checking that out and dipping your toes in it if you feel like it for a little while and see how you feel. Okay, so the first thing, let's talk about this room because it looks already quite interesting. So what are the tricks that I did to make this look like this? So we have this wood floor system from iMesh. This is a geometry nodes wood floor system. This is being updated very, very soon, so it will be faster. Now, as you can see, it kind of looks quite glossy, which is pretty nice. Let's actually turn on, it also had some bevel to bring out some details in the edges. And I've added this node group here. Now this is from a YouTuber called Christopher 3D. I'd highly recommend you check out his channel because he goes into some details in how Blender works in such good detail and in such a way that is so easy to understand. He kind of blows my mind half the time. And he explained how Blender doesn't have variable roughness. Excuse me if I'm saying this wrong, but I believe it doesn't have variable roughness. I thought it did, but apparently in Blender 3 or 4, it came out with variable specularity, I believe, or something. I'm not too technical myself, but anyway, he explained that variable roughness isn't available. And anyway, what this is that means that when you look at an object from a very small glancing angle, the object looks usually quite glossy. Even some rough surfaces like plaster, if you look at it from a very, very low angle, it looks glossy, almost mirror-like. Now, but when you look at it from a face-on view, it looks completely matte. Now, that's basically what this node group is going to do. So I recommend you checking out his channel and try adding that to a bunch of your materials. I think it's really quite helpful for like wood floors, some plasters and things like that. Now, not only that, our wood floor system does come with some dirt, which you can start to see at the edges here. So this adds some matte patches already to the scene. Okay, now for this wall, it's simply split into two. It's the same texture, it's the same brick, but what we've got is 3 different types. So we've got a black one up here, which you can't really tell, it's up because it's so dark up there. We also have a white one and a red one. Now, if you'd imagine, there is a window here in a second, I'll show you, and that will block off one side. And usually people don't paint the outside, they usually just paint the inside. So that's why it's split like that. And then we do have a little bit of displacement going on here. Right then, so now let's talk about the ambient occlusion because I've got a lot of ambient occlusion going on here and I think the scene would be nowhere near as nice if it didn't have this stuff. So let's talk about what I've got here. Now these nodes are quite messy. I never expected anyone to look at them, but let me talk you through them anyway. So what I've got here, So first of all, let's go here. So this on its own is basically just the plaster by itself. So if I plug that one into here and go like this, that's just going to be a white plaster with just a little bit of marks, but that's it. I've also rotated the texture by 15 degrees because there is going to be some tiling. If I turn this off like this, there's tiling like this. So you can see it's always very regimented. Sometimes just rotating it a little bit can make it so that it's a bit harder to see the repetition, because the repetitions are going to go like this. So this doesn't look as obvious. So that's a quick trick there. Then what we also have is another texture which looks like this, which is a very dirty texture. And this is what I wanted to be the texture for the ambient occlusion. But first I needed the ambient occlusion mask. So I have this wood floor dirt texture, which actually was from this wood floor, and I plugged that into the ambient occlusion distance. So now we can see that that is only being picked up at these edges. So if I go here, we can see this mark here, and if I go here, we can see that mark is just being made visible, and you can see it's only being at the edges now. That looks really, really nice. So that is now going into, this can be removed. That was just for my own curiosity. That actually went into a multiply mix shader. So that actually was inverted. I don't necessarily need that. I could just invert the inputs, but I have that there anyway. So what's going on here is that we have this mask, and I'm saying where it's black, I want it to be this one, and where it's white, I want it to be this one. So if I go back into here and zoom in, we can actually see that this dirt texture is, so this kind of randomness from this texture will start coming through here. If I just unplug this, it's just going to have less detail. It basically adds some more detail to the ambient occlusion, which is nice. So, but all these objects, they all come with ambient occlusion, and now this whole room has some really nice detail. And these are back planes. If I go over here, let me actually just get the back wall as well. I could just show you how they look like. If I go to render preview. Oh yes, so these are only made to be visible through the transmission ray, and I used to have windows there. So let's grab the windows, these two windows, right then. And now I can just do a quick render preview. So now we should be able to see those planes through the window. So these are it's literally just a basic cityscape. All you want to do is just add just enough detail so that it looks like a city. And then that's enough detail. So this is the skyline. And in this case, I think I also added some emission, and I didn't apparently. There's no emission strength on this. Sometimes I do find if I add a backplane that it's not bright enough. And sometimes the whole scene on the inside is quite overblown or overexposed. And then the outside is a lot darker. So sometimes I do need to add some emission strength to that. But in this case, I didn't need to. So that's good. And I think I've just seen an error. I probably should move this over slightly like this, because that wasn't always the edge. But there we go. It just looks like a basic cityscape. It doesn't really need to have any details specifically, but what I like about this is that it fits really nicely with the outside wall, and it feels like it fits. So that just adds some nice detail. Okay, so now let's talk about the main scene itself. So we have these pipes. Some of them are going through the ceiling, some of them are over the ceiling. But if I go into the camera, but if I go into the camera view, we can't really see that anyway. It's all just jankiness up the top. And these pipes, which are going to be updated very, very soon to be much faster, they are using instances anyway. So you can add a whole ton of them. And if some are not being used, it doesn't really take up too much more VRAM. So that's just some mess up there. And then we have all the plants and furniture. Now, these furniture items, I kind of eyeballed them to make them fit. They all were to scale, but when I added them into this room, sometimes they just looked a little bit too big or a little bit too small. So I just kind of scaled them to make them look like they fit a bit better. And then obviously on each one, I added some extra details. So some decorations, obviously from iMesh. And there we go. So then all I did for these plants was, because we have them all here, I would just simply get one here, and then I would append that into the scene. Something like this. And then I would do Alt-D, and then move that over like that. And then that would allow me to create a duplicate instance of the original. So if I was to edit this one, it would edit the original, and then it doesn't take up any more VRAM. It would only need to calculate the one rather than both. So I basically did that for all of them. So I got all of our new bouquets, spread them all out over the scene, duplicated some, changed others, and sometimes something like this. This is a copy of another one somewhere else in the scene, hiding here. Ah, there's one here. So if you notice this pampas grass is quite small. Over here, I stretched them all out and made them bigger. So now, even though this is an instance that uses the same geometry as this one, I can still scale it up and scale it down, and then it will still work fine. Now, there was a little change I made. So these ones, I made them green because I thought that sometimes looked quite nice. And then for the back plate, this is actually an AI image. I couldn't find one that I think fitted perfectly, but I basically wanted a dried pampas scene as an image itself. And obviously that was quite hard to find in real life, but I found this by talking to Midjourney for a little while. I think I pushed this into Adobe Sampler, and it was able to create these extra maps for me as well. That's why it looks a little bit painted and a little bit 3D, which is really nice. Now, some things to consider. So obviously there is a center line, and I try to make sure that things were even on either side, so that it wasn't too much stuff in one area or too much stuff in another area. I try to make sure everything was very nice and even. I then tried to add some nice decorations around the scene, but not too much, just enough that it just kind of sells the idea that this might be like some sort of art studio. You know, it's a little bit free, and that's basically it. Okay, so then the end result was something like this, and I felt like something was missing. I think it looked quite nice. The lighting that I intended was quite nice. I had some light coming in from here, but the main lighting was coming in from this side, but something was just missing, and I realized it was some spotlights. So I added some spotlights in. Let me drop those back into the scene. Each one comes with a pointer, and then I could just point where I want the light to go. So I basically pointed some light at the back wall, some light at a plant, and some back here, and then some towards the camera so that I could get some nice glare from that. And then it looked something like this. Okay, there we go. Now ignore the blurry image. I'm trying to do this simplify. I've got some simplify going on here to make the texture size 128 because recording this and recording the video and rendering at the same time was not working. But anyway, so this added a lot more life to the scene. It gave a lot more flow and everything seemed to pop then, and I was a lot happy with it. So at that point, I thought that was pretty much done. And then I used the render raw add-on. Okay, and when I enable render raw add-on, after doing a few slight adjustments, adding some effects and things like that, adding some glare, this is the end result. And I believe that this was my intended effect. Now, obviously, right now, the 128 resolution background and everything's looking a little bit odd, but you get an idea of how this looked. I did then put it into Photoshop afterwards and do a very slight temperature tweak and a little bit more contrast, but that was about it. But that was the scene. Now, this wasn't the final step because then I needed to actually get it rendering. And rendering this on an 8GB GPU, we're already at 7.7, was almost impossible, but I managed to get it to work in the end. When I actually did this render, I rendered it on CPU and let it render overnight, and it took about 10 hours to render. I also set it to 4,096 samples, also way too high, but I wanted to see how much the denoiser was doing. And I think past about 1,000 samples, it was a bit needless at that point, I'd say. But the end result was a very clean, very perfect render. So then, let's talk about the optimizations that I took to render the scene. And I also just noticed that this plant pot looks very odd. This plant pot should probably be here because the context is strange. It kind of looks like, is there a gap here? But anyway, let's talk about the optimizations. So the first thing that I chose was render to be 2024 maximum texture limit. Now, this was the resolution that I rendered it in, so times 200, so it'll be times 2, times 2. So it'll be 3840 by 2160 was the resolution. Now, if my texture is and then my texture limit was at 2024. So unless my texture was taking up more than half my screen, then you might start seeing problems. But as all my textures are all in the background and not taking up too much of the screen, 2024 seemed to work quite nice. Now in iMesh, whenever we release an asset, we always make sure that the resolution of the image is of the textures are high enough so you can get close-ups like this, because it is easier to have a higher texture and then make the textures smaller than starting off with a smaller texture and then needing a bigger size if you need to do a close-up. So a lot of our objects do come with quite high resolution textures. So the first thing I did for this scene, because I knew that they're all going to be in the background, was use a tool like this. So I used format swap. I grabbed all of these plants, just the leaves of them all, and then I selected all the objects, tried to find all the textures, and then I went to the resolution and set all of the leaves, all the textures maximum to 128, and then I clicked convert. So that reduced all of the leaves and petals and leaves, everything, all the way down to 128. Because we're probably not going to be looking at the leaves this close. We're going to be looking at them this far away, which in that case is probably only going to be taking up like 4 pixels by 4 pixels or something. So 128 would be fine. So that lowered all of that. Also for some materials, which I can't really see. So in this case, we can't really see this, this grain. So for that material, I actually removed the roughness map and the normal map because we can't see that. And I did that for a bunch of these surrounding objects. So I just removed any of the roughness and normal maps. And then I just roughly guessed the roughness value, and that looks fine. And the same for up here. I reduced all of the texture sizes all the way down to 128 for these as well, because these are such in shadow that you can't see them anyway, so that's fine. Also for these, because they're quite far away, I reduced these texture sizes too. For these ones, I kept them quite high because I wasn't sure if I was going to do a close-up of this area, and also these vases as well. Because these vases do take up quite a lot of space, if I was to go do this shot here, for example, I would want these areas to have higher texture sizes. So I wasn't too sure if I was going to need to have this in shot or not. So I kept that at the same size. And then for the displacement as an optimization, I went to subdivision. I said max dicing rate would for the render will be 5 pixels, which is quite high, but that still added quite enough bump to the walls that I needed. And I also noticed in my optimizations that when I made this window frame, originally the window frame was inside like this, but then I felt like it didn't really work. So I simply just pushed that out of the wall. But then I realized that that still has some textures on it, which we will never see. So that had a base color, roughness map, and normal map, all contributing to the VRAM, but we can't even see it. So I simply just unplugged them because I wasn't sure if there was actually going to be some bits which might be poking through a little bit. So I wanted it just to have some white color. Now this scene, as you can probably imagine, required me probably going a little bit lower with my texture sizes than I'd like, but it's quite a complicated scene. This on its own is 9 million polygons, and they're all individual, and these are very, very complex objects. Pampas and dry plants like this, they are generally always going to be very heavy to calculate. So having all of them in the scene in one go was a little bit of a challenge, unless I can finally upgrade my GPU. I've just seen the 5090s come out, trying to decide if that much money is worth 32 gigabytes of VRAM. But if I had that much VRAM, I could just smash this, keep this all 4K, everything, and just completely render everything without any problems. But as I'm sure most of you are hobbyists, optimizing is probably the main key. But I'd recommend, if you are having problems rendering your scene, go to Simplify, set the max texture size to 128 and 0 subdivisions, and render it. If it renders, then that's great. Decide, do you really need any subdivision? Maybe all of your objects look totally fine anyway without subdivision. So then leave that there. Then slowly start making your way up and seeing, will it render at 256? Will it render at 512? Will it render at 1024? If it does, then that's great. And then you can start working through some of these other textures. So you can actually start limiting these individual ones yourself as well. So maybe this leaf, maybe like this petal here, maybe this petal is such in the background, you're only going to see the color anyway. So just remove the roughness map or normal map. And that literally will make 0 difference to your scene. If I go here, that's going to be a roughness map and a normal map on this branch. So you would never be able to tell. So I then go through that, optimize it. Now you can see, will it render at 2048? And start making your way through there. Optimizations, I'd probably say textures are usually the biggest culprit for running out of VRAM rather than actual geometry. Now that's basically all I want to go into in this scene. If there is something that you want me to go over in more detail, some more concepts, or why did I do something in a certain way, then please do let me know. This was more of just a quick, just smash everything together, and if it looked kind of nice, I was like, yeah, that's fine. This pipe systems is so good. They are being updated to be made faster, but I couldn't have done this scene without them. I'm so happy we have them in iMesh now. Do write a comment if you do want to know more details, and also do please check out iMesh. I do not know how long we're going to keep this going for. $17 per month for full unlimited access. If you are looking to start ArcViz or get into it, or even just try it now, you can, because it's now only $17 just to dip your toes, which is ridiculous, kind of. So thank you very much for watching. If there's any other videos or tutorials you'd like, please write in the comments and I'll get back to you and see if I can do that. Thank you very much. Bye bye.